Okay, let's try this again. Well, I'll try this again. I started my video and realized I was unprepared. The battery was almost dead, and so I'm just going to give it a shot again. I was originally going to make a podcast tonight, but anyhow, I got to thinking about this. I went into the house real quick before I made this video, and there was the last 3 minutes of a podcast on a Rogan podcast. I don't remember which one it was. But it's so funny how the subject that they were talking about, I hadn't even turned it on. I think my wife put it on earlier. They were talking about something that I was just getting ready to talk about, having to do with society and people, and it fascinates me, structures. I was just at the grocery store, and I came back, and I had to grab a couple beers, so I'm sitting here with my Total Domination IPA and my backup over here. And was going to make a podcast, and I thought I'd rather make a video. So consider this a Carpo After Dark video. I used to make those because I was outside, it was dark out, and I would just share my thoughts. Because it was the only peace and quiet, or a quiet spot, or just enjoy being outside. But I hope everyone's doing well today, wherever, whoever, whenever you may be. It's November 9th, 2020 here. I've been doing a lot of thinking about why things are the way they are, and not just lately, but over most of my life. What fascinates me the most, more than anything, is people. And why people do what people do. I think one of the most valuable things that I've learned, I suppose, would be that you have to be your own person. That you can't let others dictate how you should feel and how you should be. That it's really easy to get wrapped up in what society thinks about you or expects from you. And it's easy to want to detach from that and separate and say, become the hermit. Say, fuck these people. They don't know shit. And rightfully so, in many ways. Rightfully so. I mean, all I have to do is look at the amount of people that watch reality television and think it's real. Or, the decisions that we make as humans, or the things that we think we know, make us all idiots in some way. When you can step back and really laugh at how dumb it is to be a human, and how silly it is to compete. Especially those moments I have when I'm on mushrooms with some friends, and we all look at each other and say, whoa, this meat sack, this skin around me, does not represent who I am. But somehow in our society we have kind of made it about image rather than character or substance within a lot of people. I mean, just look at the Kardashians, right? I mean, sure, fame for the sake of fame. You have sex tape, you get famous. Wow, that's great. Then you sell products based on that name, which never really accomplish anything except for suckering people into buying more shit. And I'm not going to get negative on this. I won't. I don't have a plan for this video, but I definitely, when I go freestyle, it really helps me kind of think deeper about the issues than trying to go off of notes. But what makes humans act the way that we do, and what makes us accept certain things? The recent election, for example, I walked away with a new understanding and a respect for people thinking differently. In other words, I'm not one of those people out there thinking there's this great victory from one side or the other. It's close. All elections are close. Out of 150 million people voting, it's usually within a few million votes. That shows that we have a very equal distribution of different viewpoints. And on top of that, you could break this down. I mean, that's just politics. Get into music. You think of how many people love country music and others hate it. How many people love dubstep or techno of certain sorts. How some people love techno but they hate dubstep. There's different parts and different types of music they like based on what they were raised with, their experiences. Maybe they had a negative experience around one type of music which built an association around that music or that song. This happens a lot. Certain songs people can't even listen to because it triggers them. And so all of these things about being human, they really are laughable. It's all you can do is laugh. Because it would be like the Buddhists or the Zen teachers, you know, a lot of people have this image that they're in full control of their emotions, their reactions, that anyway, that might be the goal of enlightenment, to not be affected by all that out there. That's complete nonsense in my eyes. Enlightenment requires participation, because humans are an organism. And then it gets into this, well, if all of these people are acting a certain way, maybe I'm missing something. For example, religion. It's a perfect example. When people say, oh, you know, all these people are idiots, all these Christians are idiots, you know, if an atheist says that, and they're all just fooled, and they're all, you know, religion, they shouldn't believe this crap. And you say, well, but that many people do. And even though you can dispute the numbers and say, oh, Christianity is on the decline, sure, secularism does take over, but is that better or worse? Who is there to determine whether a person needs a religion or not? That is subjective too. So like I say, we decide for ourselves, do I need this? Do I need this? But then there's some things that we step back and say, like what about drugs, for example? To some people, drinking alcohol is just something they've never done and would never do. It just seems like the most horrible thing to do any drugs. I've, you know, heard people speak that are like my age who have never touched a substance in their life that they know. They might be addicted to something else. They might be addicted to gambling, or they might be addicted to shopping, or they might be addicted to piousness. A lot of people who say don't do certain things look and see how many other people are crippled by these vices, and then they use that as kind of a hold their nose up in the air. But, you know, most people don't. Most people are pretty kind. They understand it's a live and let live world, but the structures have been tainted. They've been manipulated by those in charge, those in power. The people that we put in charge, actually I should say the people who we hire to do the work that we want them to do, which is something I think a lot of people forget that politicians are there to do. We put them in office to do our bidding, not to decide for us, but that gets kind of off topic. But not really, because when you're talking about these structures, you have to look back and say, well, why do they exist? And why do they work at all? Which is interesting to me because, for example, it's really easy to see the negative out there, if that's what you're focused on. Years ago, I was reading a lot of Manly P. Hall and Alan Watts, Ram Dass, you know, getting into philosophy and Eastern mysticism and Buddhism. Fascinated by it. Never took it as a religion or anything, because I believe anybody who understands Buddhism understands it's not a religion if you get down to the core of it. It never was. It's a way of life. Just like yoga is not wearing stretchy pants and sitting in positions. Yoga is also a way of life. Oh, I got a fruit fly in my face. Yoga is a way of life. It's supposed to be the way you live every day and every moment. I mean, I won't even get into that, but the point being that things are always more complicated than they seem on the surface. But Buddhism is really just a way of, or Zen rather, Zen Buddhism is a way of kind of like laughing things off. It's a branch off Hinduism, and each religion was catered and specified to the area that it worked best in. And for them, they could live in the mountains with that calm demeanor and do their thing, isolated. In places where there's more chaos, more war, the religions had much more strict measures and rules in them, such as don't eat pork. In Islam, which I researched, and my belief is that at the time, they realized that swine ate mostly very similar to human diet, and they didn't produce milk, and you could only eat them once, and therefore pigs were pretty much considered a wasteful commodity, a waste of resources, because they ate everything and didn't produce a lot. And so they believe that that's part of why, and I could be totally wrong. It's been a while since I've looked at these things, but but as for these other details like listening to your master or obeying your master as a slave, or thinking that, I think divine rulership is probably the best example. It's something that many cultures have believed, monarchies, kings, queens, that these people were put in, royalty was in there because God chose them. And most leaders through history have been put in office because the belief was that God chose that leader. Democracies are relatively new. And I guess even a democracy, even in a mostly Christian nation, it would be voting for a person through God, through people, right? But when it comes to believing that a person is divinely in charge, it can be a very messy situation. And it can cause a lot of, let's just say a lot of hatred. If a person believes that a person was divinely put in power and let's say they're deposed from their position, or others are disagreeing with their particular wing of the bird, which is what's happening right now in the U.S. And my belief is that it will either die down or it will become a complete wasteland. Like I was talking with somebody earlier about this, like, how long will it be, until the U.S. is like, somebody was saying something, it'll be like Mad Max, and that it won't take long for everything to fall apart. I'm not that negative about things. That's right, it was a video I watched earlier, and the guy was saying, that we're all screwed, there's greed everywhere, and corruption, and the whole system has to just be destroyed in order to restart. I've thought about this a lot, especially the potential for a major disaster that can either divide us or bring us together. Now, something like an election or a storm that happens in one area or, an earthquake somewhere, those don't bring people together. If an X-class solar flare comes and just decides to be Earth-facing in the sun, which happened 150 years ago, the Carrington event of 1859 was right when telegraph lines had started to be installed. It was a major CME, or coronal mass ejection, solar flare, and it basically charges the lines. A whole bunch of people got shocked, operators from these booths got shocked. You can look it up yourself. It was a solar storm. You could see aurora borealis from, I believe, the equator, because the aurora is, this entering of the Earth's atmosphere interacting with these particles, these charged particles. So the fascinating thing about that is that they happen regularly through history. And one could happen at any time. And the reason I bring that up is because if a large X-class solar flare was Earth-facing and did hit the Earth, it's especially damaging to the nighttime side of the Earth, I believe, because it hits the Earth and it charges around and goes back. Point being, it could blow out all these major transformers that we have. And I read years ago that something for like $5 per American citizen, it was something like, a few $1 billion, we could actually reinforce our power grid, put in insulators and separators so we could separate the lines in the case of a coronal mass ejection, which we might have somewhere between, we could have up to 8 hours, or at least 8 minutes to prepare for these things. And you can, it's a difficult retrofit, but it could save our whole system. If this happened, if there was a major CME that took out the grid, we'd be plunged into darkness. And I want people to realize how much of a potential for disaster this really is. We were talking about this the other day. I told my brother about the potential for this. And not even a little while later, somebody said, oh, there was a CME today, or a solar flare. So I looked it up. It was a small one, but it interrupted a bunch of communications over in Australia and on the other side of the world. A major blow could take out all our satellites. GPS would be down. A lot of electronics in devices would be down. You wouldn't be able to interact on the internet at all. You wouldn't be able to even have power if the transformers blew. And some of these, you just can't just go out and buy these transformers. These are monsters. So there's a certain group of them, like 7 or 8 in America, these huge ones, that if they blew, it would take years to rebuild them. I mean, there's not enough. They take so long to build, and they're so labor intensive that we're way behind, and there wouldn't be enough. So it's not to scare you. It's not to say, oh, well, we're all going to die. But, of course, we are all going to die. So what can we do to ease the burden so too many of us don't die at one time, right? In other words, it's not gloom and doom. It's like, how much can we prolong humanity and try to care about one another, try to take care of each other? With all the effort we put in as a species, you'd think that we would get something out of it. I mean, no other fucking species our size or our, works as hard as humans do. Hustle and bustle, running around. I mean, even the larger mammals, they hunt for a while, they chill. Humans have lost their ability to just chill out. We've got to do the 9 to 5 or the 9 to 9 and then to 9 again. 24-hour shifts for doctors and nurses and paramedics and police. The people that are like, you don't want to be tired. I mean, our society prides itself on working hard. When people say that Japan, their culture works too hard and they're always napping, Americans actually work more hours than the Japanese. So this idea that the Japanese overwork themselves is nothing compared to America. So I don't want to get into wages and work time and all these things, but these are all part of a society and the structure of society that we have created and we allow to flourish, right? The same structure that allows people to starve elsewhere in other states, and we don't do anything about it because we don't want to fund and I'm not talking about like welfare or anything, but even blocking people. Like the rap I wrote the other day, and if you haven't heard my homeless rap, check it out because I think it's hilarious. But that's me, and it was just a one take, a one through. So, but it's on my Patreon. Anybody can look at it on the page. But it's talking about homeless people and how if you go to feed them, you're basically a criminal. There was a 90-year-old guy who was arrested for feeding homeless people, and then he got out and he went and did it again, and he got arrested again. He's like, I'm not going to obey some law that says, you have to have a permit or licenses. The idea is people don't want homeless people in their community. And this is a really important part of our societal structure, that we can live in these large houses and pretty much sweep and shuffle these people into little, alleyways and their own little places, out of sight, out of mind. That's begun to overflow. Now LA has half the homeless people in the nation. Don't make it political. Make it humanity. People care about each other, and we really want to take care of one another. The people on top, the people who are completely disconnected from the rest of us, I don't know how they sleep at night. Fuck, I don't know if they sleep at night. I honestly don't know if, some of these people who live in these mansions and have had a silver spoon their whole life have any idea how the plebs, the proletariats, the losers, the weaklings in society, or as some rich people have been known to call them, the useless eaters, the ones who just have no real purpose in society because we're not wealthy enough. This world is run by blue-collar people. When people say there's a civil war brewing in America, I say bullshit. Why not a revolution instead? Imagine American citizens, instead of fighting each other, fighting the fucking system that oppresses everyone. But people don't get that because we are so curated. The whole feed, your feed on Facebook, your feed on YouTube, your feed from the government, your feed from the media. I mean, even a couple people I was talking to the other day, they believe that NBC or ABC News is completely unbiased and that they tell you all the truth and give you the facts and figures. Everybody knows that even, whether it's left or right-wing media, it's all controlled. You don't talk about stories where, when's the last time that you saw one of these mainstream media outlets send a person to Afghanistan to talk to American troops, to ask them how they feel about being there? Or went to any other fucking country for that matter. And, it's fascinating when you look at American news and then you look at like Al Jazeera or, RT even, which all of them are everyone's biased in their own way. You've got to realize, my brother and I were saying, both of us look at AP and we also look at Breitbart, and Fox News. And I want to know every angle of the discussion. It's just that, and it's really funny because in society I feel like that's an obligation. And a lot of folks if you have an opinion that on one side or the other, they'll be like, well, you're just listening to CNN. Or if you think the other way, the left wing will tell somebody, oh, you just listen to Fox News. The truth is, for the people who listen to it all, you're still going to make an assessed decision based on what you've heard, right? Maybe it's not always right, but I don't listen to mainstream media for information. I listen to it for omission. Because the rest of the world reports on what's going on. Everything that happens is instantly documented and posted now. And they've lost their grasp on the public's attention the way they used to have it. Just like it's harder for a musician to break through, it's also easier in some ways, right? So you can put yourself online, but network TV is having a hell of a time keeping up with the changing world. Just like the old aging dinosaur of the music industry or Hollywood or anything else. Companies, for example, adapt is what I'm saying, because it's important to their shareholders. But the people, the society as a whole, we don't adapt as a group. Some people don't want any change. They have no interest in things changing at all. They like the way it was when their parents raised them, and they don't want any waves made in America or anywhere else. The problem with that is that often these changes have to be made to help the others who we don't see, the ones that we are blinded to, the ones who live in the fucking cesspools and the rat holes in the middle of nowhere, the people who feel like they're left behind and marginalized. Not the ones who choose to live that way, but the ones who didn't. You know, the father who lost his job, that couldn't make ends meet and had to take care of his kids and struggles in a place where there's no careers and everything's shut down. There's some really good people out there who have worked hard. You know how many homeless veterans there are. It's a majority of the people compared to any other type of career or reason why a person's homeless. Veteran is right on top. And we treat people like shit. So I guess when a person says, you know, look at California, it's a cesspool, all those homeless people, fuck them, you're basically saying fuck the soldiers and fuck the U.S. Because there are a lot of people out there who need help for many reasons. You don't have to fight in a war to be a patriot. You know what I mean? There's good people out there. There's good people out there. I've actually considered maybe doing like interviews with homeless people. And, you know, I've talked with a lot of homeless folks. When I used to go to Portland when I was younger, hanging out with my friends, we'd go down there to buy acid or whatnot. And, you know, I'll never forget this one guy that had his ball hanging out. His balls were hanging out through this hole in his pants and he didn't even realize it. And we were just cracking up the whole time. Then he made this joke about going bawling in the mall. And, I mean, you know, some of these guys are just dirtbags, right? But then some people, the non-loud one in the corner, right? The person who you realize has, you know, a family and they're working at some temp job, doing anything they can to try to make ends meet. And that's just here in the U.S. You look at other countries. If you look at what's going on in the world, look, I want to put this simply because I don't want to get into the dark doom and gloom. I want to move straight into the point and why we got here. Oil, okay? The way we got to the point where we're at right now is oil. There's no way around it. No way around it at all. Or oil, coal, you know, energy, in other words. When the Industrial Revolution came, steam engine was an amazing thing. It really was. But it still required some form of oil, right, to lubricate. Oil, which we convert into gasoline and fuel, which allows us to transport things faster, allows us to, you know, build our society quickly. And when that starts to decline, then so do we, because the resources we had are depleting quickly. Now, I'm not saying there won't be oil. What we found is that what I believed 20 years ago, the peak oil that they thought about, it didn't happen. There were new fields found, new methods for hunting it. Fracking became a thing, which I don't support, but it's there. And so we have enough for right now, but that could quickly erode. We see that the whole system is controlled by, say, the oil giants, which manipulate prices. During COVID here, there was less fuel used, yet they were manipulating the prices to try to keep it artificially high. The people really have no say in these things. When they talk about a free market, it's not a free market. It's controlled and manipulated by the people who run these corporations. And it's only for the shareholders' interest. Like I heard somebody saying the media in America, it's all owned by corporate interests, except public broadcasting. which the government continuously ridicules and defunds. And they've convinced so many people that OPB is just a left-wing propaganda machine that I've even seen people posting things about Sesame Street saying that they're acting woke and that they're liberal bought out merely because of an episode where they told kids to respect each other. I mean, things that, when I was a kid, these were just things that we were taught. To care about each other and respect one another and not look at color. That was a normal thing to teach and just to be aware of. Today it's become a controversy, an issue of contention. What the fuck is wrong with people? You know? I've never heard anything on Sesame Street that I would not want my kid hearing. But people are afraid because they don't want change. They don't want their kids being taught certain things that they think are going to affect them a certain way. Some people are just assholes and racists, and they don't believe that we're all the same, or we should be equal. A lot of people truly believe that, people in this country should be based and segregated according to color or culture, If you're not aware of the history of America, and the Japanese internment camps during World War II, look it up. We imprisoned American citizens that may have had Japanese descent in these internment camps during World War II because of the fears that they might be attacking us. I mean, the same thing we've done to Muslims, same thing we've done to Mexicans. And yeah, it's not political. This isn't political. This is human. This is part of the structure of what it means to be a human and why I'm ambivalent about wanting to help other cultures, because I say, well, America first. Sure, of course we take care of ourselves. But it's not that we don't have enough resources or the funds to take care of other people. It's that we waste it on a fucking military that takes $1 trillion out of our pocket every year and a half. And who knows how much for black ops projects. And then we demonize anybody else who, dare cross us. But America does fine. We have enough. We subsidize farmers. We give money to, the meat industry and the dairy, like I was saying, and it's really sickening because if you're not aware that a lot of farmers have been paid to destroy their crops. And this happens every year. Some farmers are paid to destroy their crops. And you can look it up if you don't believe me. And I know some would try to justify it with, well, it's to keep the market balanced. If you think the market's more important than food, that's where we went wrong. That's what's wrong with the structure. We are able to grow massive amounts of food now. We are able to feed the hungry, but we choose not to. Often it's, blockades and embargoes and not being able to get the food to the right place. But look, if we put as much military might into, stopping these little rebel groups